You're sitting at your desk right now doing exactly what your company pays you to do, while the person three cubicles over is building a second income stream using the same 8 hours you are. They're not working harder than you, and they're definitely not smarter. They just understand something about workplace leverage that most people never figure out. Here's what I'm talking about. Every job you've ever had came with two portfolios, not one. There's the official portfolio, the stuff in your job description that your boss monitors and your performance reviews measure. Then there's the shadow portfolio, the invisible collection of skills, relationships, and assets you're accumulating whether you realize it or not. Most people optimize for the official portfolio their entire career and wonder why they never break through. The people getting rich, actually rich, are building their shadow portfolio while everyone else is chasing promotions. I spent 5 years as a management consultant watching executives pay millions for advice that their own employees could have provided if anyone had bothered to ask. Know what I learned? The consultants weren't smarter. They just had better shadow portfolios. They'd worked at enough companies to recognize patterns. They'd built relationships that gave them information access. They'd developed presentation skills that made obvious insights sound revolutionary. Everything they were selling, someone internal had already figured out. The difference was packaging and positioning, both shadow portfolio assets. Your company is probably paying you somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000 a year to show up and complete tasks. That's your official portfolio at work. But here's the part that should make you slightly angry. While you're executing those tasks, you're generating way more value than your salary. You're learning proprietary systems. You're building relationships with clients and vendors. You're identifying problems and inefficiencies. You're developing expertise in your industry. All of that is shadow portfolio material, and most of it walks out the door with you when you leave. The question is whether you're capturing any of it. Let me show you what I mean with something specific. Sarah works in pharmaceutical sales, makes about $90,000 a year, decent job by most standards. Her official portfolio is straightforward: meet sales targets, maintain client relationships, submit reports on time. She does all of that competently. But here's her shadow portfolio move. Every client conversation where a doctor mentions a problem with a competing product, she documents it in a private database. Not the CRM system her company monitors, her own system. After 2 years, she's got detailed intelligence on exactly what clinicians hate about every major competitor's offering. That database doesn't belong to her employer. It belongs to her. When Sarah eventually starts her own consulting practice advising pharmaceutical companies on market positioning, she won't be starting from zero. She'll have proprietary research that took thousands of hours to compile, all gathered while someone else was paying her salary. Her employer got their money's worth from her sales performance. She got something more valuable: asymmetric information advantage. This isn't about being disloyal or unethical. Sarah isn't stealing trade secrets or client lists. She's simply being intentional about what she's learning and how she's documenting it. Most people in her position have the same conversations and learn nothing transferable because they're not thinking about their shadow portfolio. They're just completing tasks and moving on. The shadow portfolio operates on 3 levels, and most people never get past the first one. Level 1 is skills acquisition. You're getting paid to learn things that have value beyond your current role. A graphic designer learning project management, an accountant learning data visualization, a teacher learning curriculum design software. These are obvious, and most people do capture some of this value, though usually not systematically. Level 2 is relationship capital. This is where it gets interesting. You interact with dozens or hundreds of people through your work: clients, vendors, partners, industry experts. Most employees treat these as transactional relationships that exist only within the context of their current job. Shadow portfolio builders treat every interaction as a potential long-term connection. They're not networking in the gross business card collecting sense. They're genuinely adding value to people in ways that get remembered. Marcus works in corporate real estate, finding office space for expanding companies. His official job is to close deals and hit quarterly targets. His shadow portfolio play is different. Whenever a client mentions they're struggling to hire for a specific role, Marcus introduces them to someone from his network. When a vendor mentions they're looking for new clients, Marcus makes a warm introduction if it makes sense. None of this is in his job description. His company doesn't measure it or reward it, but over 5 years, Marcus has become the person who connects people in his city's commercial real estate ecosystem. When Marcus launches his own boutique real estate advisory, he won't need to spend a dollar on marketing. He'll have a network of people who've already experienced his value and trust his judgment. That network was built entirely during work hours, while his employer paid his salary. They got their deals closed. He got something that compounds. Level 3 is the one almost nobody sees: and it's where the real wealth transfer happens. This is about identifying systematic inefficiencies or opportunities that your current employer either can't or won't address. You're inside the machine. You see where it breaks. You understand what customers actually want versus what the company thinks they want. You recognize that this problem exists because you're paid to solve the company's problems, not your own. But the problems are often the same. The gap between what you see needs to exist and what actually exists becomes your laboratory. Jennifer manages supply chain logistics for a mid-sized manufacturer. She's noticed that 3 different departments are using 3 different software systems to track essentially the same information. The inefficiency costs the company maybe $200,000 annually in duplicate work and errors. She's mentioned it to management twice. They acknowledged the problem, said they'd look into it eventually, but nothing changed. Too many other priorities. Not urgent enough, classic corporate inertia. Here's what Jennifer does instead of getting frustrated. She starts documenting exactly how these systems fail to communicate. She builds a detailed map of the workflow showing where information gets lost or duplicated. She interviews people in each department to understand their specific pain points. She researches software solutions that could integrate everything. She even builds a rough cost-benefit analysis showing the ROI of fixing this mess. Her employer never implements her solution. They're too slow, too bureaucratic, too invested in legacy systems. But Jennifer's documentation becomes the foundation for something else. She realizes that if her company has this problem, probably hundreds of other mid-sized manufacturers have the exact same problem. Most of them also have people like her who see the issue but can't fix it from inside. 3 years later, Jennifer launches a consulting firm that specializes in supply chain software integration for mid-market manufacturers. Her very first client pays her $50,000 for work that took her 3 weeks. Work she's essentially already done. She's solving the same problems she identified years ago, except now she's capturing the value instead of watching it evaporate into corporate inefficiency. This is level 3 shadow portfolio thinking. You're getting paid to identify million-dollar problems. Your employer might not have the capability or willingness to solve those problems, but someone will. The question is whether you're documenting what you're learning in a way that becomes valuable later. Most employees see problems, complain about them, and move on. Shadow portfolio builders see problems, document them systematically, and build expertise around solving them. The documentation happens on company time. The expertise gets developed while someone else pays your salary. The eventual monetization happens when you're ready. This isn't about half-assing your current job to prepare for your next one. Paradoxically, shadow portfolio builders are often exceptional employees because they're genuinely invested in understanding how things work. They're asking deeper questions. They're connecting dots that others miss. They're building institutional knowledge that benefits their current employer. The difference is they're also keeping receipts. They're maintaining their own documentation systems. They're building their own knowledge bases that exist separately from company servers. When they eventually leave, they don't take proprietary information or trade secrets. They take insights, frameworks, and understanding that were developed inside their own heads. The traditional career path tells you to be loyal, work hard, and hope your employer rewards you appropriately. The shadow portfolio approach recognizes that your employer is already extracting maximum value from your labor. You're simply ensuring that value creation isn't entirely one-directional. Think about how much you've learned in your current job, the software you've mastered, the industry knowledge you've accumulated, the processes you understand, the relationships you've built. Most people treat all of that as company property that somehow evaporates when they change jobs. Shadow portfolio builders treat it as personal assets that compound over time. The most sophisticated version of this strategy involves identifying what I call leverage points. These are skills or knowledge areas where small amounts of expertise create disproportionate value. You're not trying to become the world's foremost expert on something. You're trying to know more than 95% of people about something that matters to a specific market. David works in customer service for a software company. Boring job, decent pay, nothing special. But David notices something interesting. The angriest customers, the ones who threaten to cancel and demand refunds, almost always have the same underlying issue. They don't understand how to use 3 specific features that would solve their problems. The features exist, the documentation exists, but there's a gap between how the software was designed and how normal humans actually think about their problems. David starts keeping a journal of these conversations. He identifies patterns in how people misunderstand the product. He develops his own explanations that actually work, that translate technical functionality into human language. He creates unofficial tutorials that he shares with struggling customers. He gets really good at turning angry people into happy people in under 10 minutes. His employer benefits from this. David's customer retention numbers are exceptional, but David is building something else. He's developing deep expertise in user onboarding and customer education. He's learning exactly where software companies fail to communicate with their users. He's building a library of before and after case studies showing how proper explanation changes user behavior. 4 years later, David launches a specialized consulting service. He helps software companies redesign their onboarding experiences and customer education materials. His clients are companies whose products are powerful but confusing, exactly like his former employer. He charges $15,000 per project for work he's essentially been practicing for years. Your current job is either building your shadow portfolio or it's not. The tasks are the same either way. The difference is entirely in how you're thinking about what you're learning and how you're documenting it. Most people are getting paid once for their work. Shadow portfolio builders are getting paid once now and creating assets that pay them repeatedly later. Here's the thing, nobody tells you about building wealth. It doesn't happen because you suddenly get access to secret information or exclusive opportunities. It happens because you start seeing the value in what you're already doing. Your current job is either an expense or an investment. For most people, it's an expense. They trade 40 hours for a paycheck, the money disappears into bills and lifestyle, and they start over next week. Shadow portfolio builders treat their job as an investment. They're getting paid to build assets that compound over time. The math is pretty straightforward. If you work for 40 years and only capture the value of your immediate labor, you've essentially been paid once for 40 years of work. If you build a shadow portfolio while doing that same work, you've been paid once immediately and created assets that pay you for decades after. Same hours, same effort, completely different outcome. You already have access to everything you need. The problems you're solving at work right now, someone will pay you to solve those same problems later. The relationships you're building today, those become your network tomorrow. The expertise you're developing while someone else pays your salary, that becomes your competitive advantage. The only question is whether you're capturing any of it or letting it all evaporate into corporate amnesia. Start documenting, start connecting, start thinking about what you're building that walks out the door with you. Your employer is already extracting maximum value from your labor. You might as well do the same.